Whether they're wrestling the most basic of matches, an epic length battle with lots of high spots, or a weapons-laden fight to the near death, professional wrestlers will emphasize just how important cooperation is. The man or woman across the ring from you is trusting you with their body and their health, and they're doing you the same courtesy by making sure you get out of the match in as good a physical state as possible. Accidents happen sometimes, but the diligence is there. But not always. Once in a while, when there's bad blood a-brewing, the gloves might come off, and a wrestler may find themselves having to deal with a very real beating from an opponent with a grudge, or just a mercenary order to ignore the script. Other times, there's just a lack of cooperation from a disinterested party in the match, and all semblance of professionalism goes right out the window. In this list, we'll look back at some historical examples of times when kayfabe gave way to hostility, callousness, and/or indifference. Wrestling aims to help you suspend your disbelief, but at times, it became too real for its own good. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 wrestling matches that turned real. Join us. Number 10, Bret Hart vs. Jerry Lawler. When a wrestler is a little too snug with a strike or maneuver, their opponent may get their receipt with something in retaliation. Usually it's nothing personal when that happens, but it was very much different at SummerSlam 1993 when Lawler snuck in while the Hitman was wrestling Doink the Clown and almost caved in the side of Bret's face with a metal crutch. Hart had already been injured when Lawler slammed a heavy wooden throne onto his body at King of the Ring months earlier, and Bret, through his days, quietly swore revenge. The finish of Hart's match with Lawler, Hart wrestled concurrent matches, was for him to win via the sharpshooter, but in keeping with the storyline, he would keep the hold locked on for several minutes after the bell in order to torture the King, causing the referee to reverse the decision. When Hart applied the hold, he didn't do so loosely, and when you watch the footage, what you're seeing is Hart cinch up the hold tight in an attempt to injure Lawler's back and legs for real. Lawler's not selling whatsoever, he's in very real pain as Hart takes advantage of the storyline situation. As Hart wrote later, Lawler was seen crawling on the locker room floor, unable to stand up due to the damage. Number 9, Earthquake vs. Koji Kitao. Kitao was a former sumo wrestler turned protege of Genichiro Tenryu, and the two actually worked a match at WrestleMania 7, defeating Demolition. The following week, a number of WWE stars traveled to Japan for a pair of joint shows with performers from Super World of Sports, and one night in Kobe, the notoriously volatile Kitao was matched up with another ex-sumo in Earthquake. Kitao had already lost to him in the Tokyo Dome 2 nights earlier and wasn't keen on doing so again. Kitao shot not so much by trying to hurt Earthquake legitimately, but by just being uncooperative in general. He didn't go through the motion of the match, refused to sell, and then ultimately struck the referee legitimately in order to halt the contest. Kitao then took the microphone, declared that professional wrestling was all fake, that Earthquake was a phony, and that he wasn't going to lose to him again. Kitao was fired from SWF after that entire spectacle, and the incident made the mainstream newspapers over in Japan. Number 8, Hacksaw Jim Duggan vs. Matt Bourne. Nearly 3 decades earlier, Duggan and Bourne partnered with Ted DiBiase as the Rat Pack in Mid-South Wrestling. Duggan and Bourne were friendly toward one another in the years since, but there were apparently unresolved tensions from that time period, at least in Bourne's eyes. In May of 2010, the two were opponents at a Pro Wrestling Syndicate card where 350 fans expecting to see two veterans square off got exactly that. As Duggan told the story in his memoirs, Bourne was apparently upset that Hacksaw turned down some outlandish spots beforehand, as 56-year-old Duggan wasn't going to be doing anything crazy or brutal. During the brief match, the original Doink tried to kick Duggan in the face legitimately and followed up with several unpulled punches. The two then had a standoff, Bourne with a chair, Duggan with his 2x4, resulting in a double countout, and an irate Duggan challenged Bourne to meet him in the locker room. According to Duggan, Bourne had put his bags in his car before the match with the intention of ambushing Hacksaw and then hightailing it before Duggan knew what hit him. Number 7, Bruiser Brody vs. Lex Luger. Perhaps no wrestler marched to the beat of his own drum more than Frank Donald Goodish, the fearsome latter-day caveman known as Bruiser Brody. Bruiser is regarded as one of the greatest brawlers in the history of the business, but also one of the hardest to work with. A young, inexperienced Lex Luger found this out firsthand one night when he was locked inside a steel cage with the wild and woolly Brody. For reasons that are not entirely clear, Brody just stopped cooperating mid-match. Luger would attempt offense, and Brody didn't budge, didn't respond, didn't care. In differing versions versions of the story, some say that Brody had zero interest in playing along with Luger, who reportedly tried to lay out the match himself to the more experienced Brody. Others speculate that Brody was just annoyed with the promoters, or he just wasn't feeling the match and he chose to submarine the entire spectacle. Luger claimed that Brody had razor blades on his fingers, and the total package, fearing that Brody may try to carve him up in a blind rage, stopped trying to work, climbed over the cage wall, and got away from his opponent. Number 6. Sexy Star vs Rosemarie. This AAA match was in fact a 4-way, but the issue concerns Star and Rosemarie and an unusual bit of business that occurred at the very end of the match. After close to 10 minutes of action, Star applied an armbar on Rosemarie, drawing a submission and retaining her title. On the surface, that seems fairly routine, but the truth was much more alarming. Star had in fact, for reasons still unclear, applied a legitimate shoot armbar and caused a very real injury by popping Rosemarie's elbow out of its socket. There were reports that Lady Shania had coarsely attacked Star earlier in the match with a snug kick to the head, and the two eventually came to real blows during the match, requiring referee intervention. Whatever the situation was, Rosemarie was apparently not part of the animosity and was in fact an innocent victim. Various appalled wrestlers tweeted about the incident, with Cody Rhodes and Road Dogg at the forefront. Star did lose a number of bookings in the aftermath and was stripped of her belt shortly after. Number 5. Paul Roma vs Alex Wright. In early 1995, Roma and Wright were passing each other, going in opposite directions. The 19-year-old Wright was getting pushed as a bright-eyed prodigy, while veteran Roma was continuing his slow way down deeper into the mid-card. Wright was going over on everyone to this point, including a young Triple H, and Roma was going to be no exception. The two were matched up in Super Brawl's opening match, and while the plan was for Wright to look strong, Roma had other ideas. Roma, who apparently had no interest in helping to elevate Wright, guzzled up the offense for himself in the match, calling spots that benefited him instead of the young rookie. And whatever offense Wright did get in, Roma put no effort into selling. Roma even tried to kick out of what was supposed to be the match-ending pinfall, but the referee levied the count anyway. Roma found himself on the outs with WCW for that unprofessional performance and was let go the following month. Number 4. Andre the Giant vs Akira Maeda. Andre needs no introduction, but for those just learning of Maeda, know this. He is both one of the foremost pioneers in the realm of shoot-style pro wrestling, and he's also gained a notoriety for, among other things, legitimately kicking Riki Choshu in the face during a 1987 match, breaking his orbital bone. He also refused to work a program with living legend Antonio Inoki. And of course, there's the time he and Andre had one of the longest and most confusing cluster Fs you've ever seen. Andre, for reasons that aren't entirely clear, couldn't be asked to sell any of his opponent's submission attempts, and at points even made aggressive moves for Maeda's eyes. In response, the ill-tempered Maeda began throwing sharp kicks at Andre's legs, which the 8th wonder of the world hardly registered. Akira's reputation as an artful shooter was suffering in this bizarre scene, as he just kept kicking at Andre's legs until a seemingly bored Giant laid down to take an intentional fall. A furious Enoki then hit the ring and ordered a halt to the match after over 25 minutes of something that barely resembled a wrestling match. Number 3. Perry Saturn vs Mike Bell. As noted in the Hart vs Lawler example earlier, it's not uncommon for someone to get their receipt on the opponent for ringing their bell, but there's probably a limit. The saying goes, an eye for an eye, not an eye, all the teeth, several vertebrae, and your rib cage for an eye. It's fair to say that Perry Saturn got a wee bit carried away after longtime WWE enhancement talent Mike Bell brought Saturn down awkwardly on an arm drag attempt. Following the bungled move, Saturn began swinging wildly at Bell with a flurry of strikes and kicks before sending him flying through the ropes to the floor, and Bell landed squarely on his head in ugly fashion. That wasn't enough for Saturn, who then picked up Bell at ringside in a double leg lift and ran him back first into the ring steps, which by no means was part of Saturn's usual offense. Saturn was sent home for a week, and it was shortly after that he was given the moppy gimmick, after being knocked loopy from an assault by the APA. Number 2. The Acolytes vs Public Enemy. Rocco Rock and Johnny Grunge seemed like they'd have been good fits for Attitude Era WWE, what with their arena-encompassing brawls in ECW and WCW. In fact, in early 1999, the veteran duo had returned to ECW to feud with the Dudley Boys, only to be quickly let go when they refused to cooperate in an angle in Detroit. Shortly after, WWE scooped them up, and their apparent unwillingness to go with the flow cost them just as dearly. The two were slated to face Bradshaw and Farouk in a brief Sunday night heat match that would end via DQ when either Rock or Grunge was put through a table. Public Enemy was said said to have refused to do the table spot just before they headed out to the ring, and once out there, the future APA were going to make damn sure they went through the table. Frightening chair shots to the skull and some of the stiffest strikes you've ever seen rolled out for several minutes, with Rock and Grunge getting in next to zero offense. Grunge did go through that table, but not before the Acolytes unflinchingly beat both men into oblivion. Number 1, Kurt Angle versus Daniel Puder. Puder was the eventual winner of Tough Enough 4, though he was far from your typical starstruck reality show contestant. He was a trained mixed martial artist with, at the time, one official fight to his credit. On this particular episode of SmackDown, an intense Angle, chest puffed out, handed one of the contestants his ass in a bit of legitimate shoot wrestling. He then challenged the other contestants to try him, and the experienced Puder accepted. When this unscripted segment was greenlighted, it was probably with the assumption that nobody would be able to step to a freestyle wrestling god like Kurt Angle, and if so, they sorely underestimated Puder. Angle took the young hopeful down, only for Puder to quickly snatch Angle in a Kimura lock. Referee Jimmy Corderas quickly counted Puder down in an awkward pinfall because Angle wasn't getting out of the hold and couldn't tap, needing to save face. Had the hold been applied for a few seconds more, Angle could have been seriously injured, and you can't really blame Puder. He answered the call to take part in something real, and in a less controlled circumstance, it almost became too real.
Thanks for watching. Let us know what you think in the comments down below. You can follow us on Twitter at Cultaholic. You can find us on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do here at Cultaholic, you can pledge to us on Patreon. That's patreon.com/Cultaholic. And most importantly, don't forget to hit subscribe and join us.